Is it letting you go live?
Yeah, it takes a minute to go live on YouTube. Then I got to mute it because there's like a 10-second delay in the audio.
Yes, there is.
There we go.
Is it letting you go?
I'm live on YouTube now.
Okay.
I look old. The fuck? All right, at any rate, we're going to talk about, I can't necessarily see the YouTube feed, so anybody that posts anything, I'll be happy to answer after it's over. Now we're going to talk about liars. I had an occasion tonight to come across a man that just bald-faced lied in public about some things that occurred between he and I. So we're going to talk about where that comes from, what it means, and our stunning ability to do it to ourselves. And we'll take it right out of the Lord. That's the only place I want to take it from. I'm going to take it from somebody's book, maybe mine, because they're better than everybody else's. But it says, also numbered among the Asir is he whom some called the mischief monger of the Asir, and the first father of falsehoods, and blemish of all gods and men. His name is Loki, or Lotri, son of Arbalti, the giant. His mother was Laufey, or Nal. His brothers are Bilister and Helblindi. Loki is beautiful and comely to look upon, evil in spirit, very fickle in habit. He surpassed other men in that wisdom which is called sleight, S-L-E-I-G-H-T, and had artifices for all occasions. He would ever bring the Asir into great hardships and then get them out with crafty counsel. His wife was called Sigyn, or girlfriend, their son Nari or Narfi. That's a pretty damning introduction by any stretch of the imagination. Yet we will continually see people that want to do that. Why is that here? That's the first thing we got to ask ourselves. We've gone through all of these gods. As a matter of fact, the one above him is Forseti, God of justice. That is the best seat of judgment among gods and men. A hall is called Glitnir, with gold 'tis pillared, and with silver thatched the same. Therefore Seti bides the full day through and puts to sleep all suits. And yet, throughout the lore, we come across the idea that Odin is the deceiver and the liar. And I can think of a couple examples people wish to use for that. But when you're dealing with people that are not part of your Inengarth, what is your obligation to them? But here is a person close to us, or perhaps even in our own thoughts, because that's where the most damage is always done, in our own thoughts, is Loki. Seated amongst all of the best, the brightest, this assemblage of the Asir that Odin has worked together, the best of the Vane, the Vanir, the Wanes, the best of the Asir, these gods of the earth, these gods of the sky. They represent beauty and abundance, love, intelligence, strength, protection, law, and sacrifice. And right in the middle of it is a lie. And sometimes, and I was talking today about it. My grandfather told me, he said, Brian, behind every great fortune is the shadow of a lie. We don't have to look very far across today's headlines to see that's true. Behind every great fortune is the shadow of a lie. Somehow, some way, somewhere, somebody screwed somebody over so they could get ahead and make a fortune and become what they think they want to become, and gather a stack of money. Now, if a tidal wave, 1,000-foot high, comes washing across North America, it ain't going to do them a fucking bit of good. But in the midst of all of this powerful positive imagery is a lie. The mischief monger of the Asir and the first father of falsehoods, the blemish of all gods and men. Now, what could that possibly mean? How could that possibly be something we might use in this spirituality to develop in any kind of positive manner? Because quite frankly, what typically happens amongst your uninspired and uninitiated individuals who stumble into this and begin to create their own thing talk about it as if they know something, they begin to celebrate the negative aspects of themselves. Some will call it, they believe their own bullshit. And that's a problem because he is beautiful and comely to look upon, evil in spirit and very fickle in habit. When you come across a person that's a liar, you got to ask yourself a couple of real questions. Do I feel like playing the mental gymnastics involved in dealing with somebody that isn't always truthful? How on my guard do I want to be around this person all the time when I know they've just told me a lie, even if it's a little white lie? Do I want to waste my time? Or what's the positive outcome in this? See, this all comes to a head at Eager's Feast, where you have all of the positive, where all of these gods are gambled to feast in the bounty and abundance of the ocean and the water of life, the seas of the living. One negative thought enters and kills the one working hardest. He gets run off and he comes back and he starts stirring up shit. Now, when you deal with a liar in life, first off, you got to be able to recognize it. More often than not, we never do until it's too late. The damage is done. The hurt's been caused. You've been suckered. You've been deceived. We begin to figure out, probably going to public school, the mechanisms by which we might say, I'm not sure that I believe that person. But amidst our own thought process, and particularly among individuals that would celebrate this being, there's a tendency to believe their own bullshit, to kind of celebrate the negative aspect of it. You also see it with people that believe Golveg is Freya. You see the kind of witchy woman, kind of walking around Stevie Nicks style, kind of something dark and mysterious about her. No, honey, you're 30 pounds overweight. Quit wearing that shit. You're not fucking witchy. You're not fucking scary. How about be happy and let's celebrate something? And that's going to piss a lot of fucking people off. It's just the way it is. At some point, we've got to figure out how to be honest with ourselves. See, it says courage and honesty in the 9 noble virtues, the top of the list. Now, people say, well, I don't want to believe in those. Well, what are you going to believe in? You going to believe your own bullshit? Are you going to grab a hold of a set of principles and start trying to follow up on something? That means having the courage to be honest with yourself about the things you're saying and doing and how you're acting. And that ain't the easiest thing for people to do for some damn reason. You want to know why? Because they feel like they won't be as important. Now, Loki is that individual that has a seat at the damn table. He has a seat at the table. He has a wife. They have a son. He has the opportunity to begin to emulate the powerful, positive aspects of those around him, and yet he chooses to continue to be a dick. And it costs him. It costs him dearly. But before it costs him, let's talk about the damage that having just one of those individuals, tolerating one of those individuals in your midst, really does to everybody around you. See, the next paragraph says, yet more children had Loki with Angerboda, who is the name of a certain giantess in Jotunheim, with whom Loki gat 3 children. One was Fenris Wolf, the second Jormungandr, that is the Midgard serpent. And I can see that. The third they say here is Hel, which I think is complete horseshit. But when the gods learned that this kindred was nourished in Jotunheim, and when the gods perceived by prophecy that from this kindred great misfortune should befall them, and since it seems to all that there was a great prospect of ill, first from the mother's blood, and yet worse from the father's, then all fathers sent gods thither to take the children and bring them to him. And when they came to him, straightway he cast the serpent into the deep sea, where he lies about all the land. And this serpent grew so greatly that he lies in the midst of the ocean, encompassing all the land, and bites upon his own tail, the Ouroboros. Now it talks about Hel, he cast into Niflheim, and gave to her power over 9 worlds to apportion all abodes among those that were sent to her, that is, men dead of sickness or of old age. So that leaves Freya as a goddess of death, for half the slain on the battlefield, and Odin, a god of death, for the other half slain on the battlefield. Everybody else will get to meet the sun-facing goddess, the goddess standing at the entrance to the burial mound, the front half of her beautiful, facing the sun, the back half of her dark and mysterious of the earth, that point of in-between. Now it goes in here to slander her greatly and make you fear death, which was not something those people typically did. But now this child of Loki and Angrboda, this Fenris wolf, this is another story altogether. But the wolf the Aesir brought up at home, and Tyr alone dared to go to him and give him meat. Why would this god of battle, who didn't settle things between men, who was a god of war and quite possibly a predecessor of Odin in the timeline, and can be traced back to the steppes of Eurasia, Deus Praetor, a twin god himself, the first possessor of Gungnir, he raised this wolf. What does this wolf represent? What does this tale mean that this god of war had this wolf? Odin has two wolves, Greki and Freki, greed. Tyr alone dared to go to him to give him meat. How many men pick up the darkness of somebody else's attitudes and begin to care for it as their own, even though they're quite certain all of their friends are telling them, listen, you need to quit fucking around with that stuff. It's going to eat your lunch. Usually the biggest, the baddest, the one that thinks nobody can do anything to him. So as Tyr is raising this wolf, here is this offspring of Loki and Angrboda, the chief backbiter and deceiver of the gods, the nuisance upon all men, the negative thought amongst all the positive attributes of the gods of Asgard, this liar, this deceiver, this being that represents our finest ability to deceive ourselves, has a wolf as an offspring that Tyr decides to raise. There's something about men, and particularly in this society, and they want to do something great. And there seems to be no outlet other than the military for such an expansion of the greatness of the individual, or in the ring. The ring will work too. Octagon. We are hardwired to be like that. Some parts of the country, it's more prominent than in others. So Tyr takes this wolf, dares to give him meat. This great shadow of a danger looming over all of his friends, and yet he's feeding it every day. So from the father of lies and the monster cave woman in Angrboda and Jotunheim, he picked up something that he thought might make him a little bit more important. Or maybe he felt like it was just a pup and that young life should be spared. What it is a lie. Tyr is believing this lie, this physical offspring of the father of lies, the chief backbiter and deceiver of the gods. Tyr is raising this lie. Men in this world will oftentimes find an idea or a situation that makes them feel empowered. You can look at any of the talk show programs that are consistently raising Cain, be it left or right, about the state of political affairs and people will sit there and become as righteously indignant as they possibly can, feeling the rush of energy and anger, and they will take it and they will nurse it and they will cherish it and they will share it with anyone that will listen to them, and it's not doing them any good. And this is Tyr with the offspring of the father of lies. He's picked up an idea. It is also Sigurd in his quest to do something against Fafnir at the behest of Regan. A lesser man, a liar, has fed to another man an idea that makes him feel as if he will be important if he accomplishes this, or if he takes care of this, or if he nourishes and nurtures this idea. And this is antithetical to all of the rest of what's going on in Asgard. You have the warder of heaven, the warder of men, and bounty, and abundance, and plenty, and justice, and beauty, and all of these things are these positive. These are the positive attributes that allow, when we embrace them in our own thought process, that allow us to step up and succeed and become what we wish to become, if nothing more, to be content and maybe be a little bit happy in our present circumstances. To be able to realize, it's really not that important. I don't need to get upset about it. But if you're raising that part of you that has a wolf inside, well, you'll never get to enjoy that kind of peace. This is the lies that we tell ourselves. That, you know what, I'm going to hang on to that idea because it makes me feel important. The anger I get from that idea makes me feel empowered. The anger I get to express from that fills me with a rush of endorphins and adrenaline that makes me feel a little bit more alive. Now, Tyr is the perfect example of that. He is the warrior god. He is the one-handed warrior god, and he's feeding that wolf. And there's a real danger when we begin to take that idea that comes from someone that's told us a half-truth or an outright lie, and we begin to take it and raise it and feed it and treat it as if it was our own thought, and raise it and bring it up into the world and all of our friends around us. Or you can say if they're a drunk, or if they're stuck on crystal meth, or if they're, snorting lines of blow, or shooting heroin, or eating Lortabs, or eating Xanax. All of those are the wolf that will devour you. And all of your friends are probably saying, hey, that shit's no good for any of us. It's hurting all of us. So they try to bind it. When the gods saw how much he grew every day, and when all prophecies declared that he was fated to be their destruction, and all of those things I just mentioned will be the destruction of individuals who fully embrace them and keep feeding them, including the irrational hatred of ideas someone else told you need to be angry about. Then the Aesir seized upon this way of escape. They made a very strong fetter, and they called it Ledinger, and brought it before the wolf, bidding him try his strength against the fetter. The wolf thought that no overwhelming odds, and let them do with him as they would. The first time the wolf lashed out against it, the fetter broke. So he was loosed out of Ledinger. So sometimes we might give a little half-assed effort to kind of get this under control, to kind of tie this down and maybe get a handle on things. When these ideas take such a deep root within our thought process, they begin to affect another aspect of our personality, that once it begins to burgeon across the boundaries or the edges of the chaos of our minds, of our thought process, and our ego gets out of control and out of run amok because we are so thoroughly sold into or bought into this bill of goods that has come from the father of lies and a witch out of Jotunheim, and is being raised by the warrior, the fighting aspect of who we are. Our egos get out of control. And you see it every day on social media. You also see those people kicked off of social media on a regular basis. Woe unto them, and the wailing and gnashing of teeth occurs when they get kicked off social media. I was just telling the truth. I was expressing. Shut the fuck up. You were bitching about something that made yourself feel like your ego was more important than it really was. Deal with it. My drill sergeant had a real simple answer to all of that. Every time we'd start whining about being in basic training, just basic training, he said, "You asked for it when you said, yeah, I want to be in the infantry." And I stick to that hard and fast about everything that goes on. If I'm in the middle of doing something I don't like, I asked for it because I decided to feed that wolf today. If I'm driving down the road and somebody runs me off and I decide to get wrapped up in road rage, I ask for what's coming next because I decided to feed that wolf instead of keep it bound down. Now, when that wolf breaks that first bond, now the ego takes complete control of the individual. The value of who they are is in their ability to negotiate and deal with and debate and justify their position in this world. And they've just had a little bit of success with it. He just broke free of the first bond. You can't hold me down. I know what I'm talking about. I got this under control. By gosh, I know that I'm right. After this, the Aesir made a second fetter, stronger by half, which they called Dromi, and bade the wolf try that fetter, saying he would become very famous for strength if such huge workmanship should not suffice to hold him. But the wolf thought that this fetter was very strong. He considered also that strength had increased in him since the time he broke Ledinger. The ego's out of control, run amok. It came into his mind that he must expose himself to danger if he would become famous, so he let the fetter be laid upon him. Now when the Aesir declared themselves ready, the wolf shook himself, dashed the fetter against the earth, and struggled fiercely with it, spurned against it, and broke the fetter so that the fragments flew far. So he dashed himself out of Dromi. Since then it passes as a proverb to loose out of Ledinger or to dash out of Dromi when anything is exceeding hard. If you come to a point in your life where you're so struggling with an issue or an idea that may not necessarily have been yours to begin with, and you cannot overcome a crippling, even addiction or thought process that makes everyone around you not really like you because you're kind of a dick, bitching about shit all the time. Your wolf is broken out of the second bond. Now what are you going to do? Now, in our own inability to get control of our own thought process, there's something else running around in there that's not necessarily conducive to our best interest in this world. And it always comes from somebody else's idea. And their only interest is in that people understand how right they are about the situation. Not that they can change it, not that they can do anything about it. And social media has allowed that to foster in a way we could never have begun to imagine. It spreads like a cancer. Henry Ford once said that if you have one man in a factory of 100 with a bad attitude, it will spread like cancer until almost all production drops in half. He's not wrong. The same thing happens on social media. So the knee-jerk reaction is to go all the way the other way. See, they're feeding the wolf too. We're all kind of feeding the wolf of one way or another. Now, after that, the Aesir feared that they should never be able to get the wolf bound. So this is the drunken uncle that destroys every party now. This is the guy that shows up and nobody wants to talk to him. This is the guy that comes to work on Monday morning with a scowl on his face. He's angry. He doesn't want to be there, but he has to pay the bills. But this place would fall apart if he wasn't there running it. And just those dickheads you run across in life. Completely out of control. That's who they think they are. That's who they think empowers them and protects them from the dangers of this world. Little do they know it's consuming them. My father was that way. He always thought it was something out there was the greatest challenge to conquer in life, never understanding that it's always something in here or in here that determines the quality of a man's character. Not if you best a dragon, not if you beat an army, not if you drive a fast race car or race a horse, not if you fight another man and win. Will it settle the struggle that we have with our own thought process? Until we can handle that, until we can handle with the offspring of the father of lies in our own thought process, we will always be struggling to bind to these things. And every time it breaks free, it's going to cost us even more. So the All-Father sent him to who is called Skirnir, Frey's messenger. Now, Skirnir is a fairly important cat. Down into the region of the Black Elves to certain dwarves, it caused to be made the fetter called Gleipnir. It was made of 6 things: the noise a cat makes in footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a rock, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. And though thou might understand not these matters already, yet now thou mayest speedily find certain proof herein that no lie is told of thee. Thou must have seen that a woman has no beard, and no sound comes from the leap of a cat, and there are no roots under a rock. And by my troth, all I have told thee is equally true, though there be some things which thou canst not put to the test. So it's absorbing things in the world that probably had a part of it. Sometimes our thought process causes us to use up resources in a fashion that doesn't help us prepare for the future. Think of a drug addict needing his next fix. Think of a drunk who has the shakes the next morning and has to have another drink or must have a glass of orange juice or something. Think of the people with their issues around sex and the constant idea for conquest or whatever comes along. Think of the demons that people wrestle with, and we've called them demons for a long time. Here they're calling it a wolf. This is the wolf that's it's gnawing upon your soul. So when it says that it is murderers, the deceivers of men's wives, and the breakers of oaths who are gnawed upon by Nidhogg below the roots of Yggdrasil and down in the misty hell, in our own lives, we also have some hint of what that looks like. When our thought process, when we lay down at night and we get ready to go to sleep, I could have done that a little bit better. Maybe I didn't be so hard on them. Nah, fuck them. They got what they deserved. Because I'm Brian Wilton and blah, blah, blah. Now, is that really any way to go through life? Now, maybe as a young warrior, that kind of mindset is essential because you're fixing to take the life of another person because they're the enemy. But to undo that mindset is another thing. Maybe you're in a gang and you need to take the life of an opposing gang member. Maybe you need to seek up. These are the wolves that men feed. I've always said that when it comes time for a warrior to settle down, he's got to pass on that torch to someone else, as Frey does to Skirnir when he gives him the sword that fights of its own accord. You don't carry this kind of wolf into a relationship. It will devour that relationship too. Then said Gangleri, this certainly I can perceive to be true. These things which thou hast taken for proof I can see. But how was the fetter fashioned? Har answered, that I am well able to tell thee. The fetter was soft and smooth as a silken ribbon, but as sure and strong as thou shalt not hear. The family ties that bind and gag are the same way. They're soft and smooth as a silken ribbon, but those family bonds are as sure and as strong. Do we want to bind ourselves to someone that can't handle that kind of necessity, that kind of deal? We reluctantly deal with those individuals we routinely see failing to deal with the wolf in their own life. It's consuming their soul. It's consuming their very being. They physically become ill. My father, he had some kind of bypass surgery every year for the last 7 or 8 years of his life. They'd go in and balloon him out, send him on his way. Go in and balloon that out, send him on his way. Go in and balloon this one out, send him on his way. Oh, here's 3 in your heart. The rest have 89 or 90% blockages. We'll get this one, this one, this one, this one. Send him on his way. All of that anger and frustration and the wolf settled in his heart, clogged it up. People get physically ill all the time because of their thought processes. You see people that talk about that all the time. Your thoughts can save your life. And they literally can. But until we begin to recognize the danger of the thoughts devouring us, you're never going to have the impetus to want to try to do that. You see, monks in Southeast Asia who sit in a cave and practice breathing. They can change the temperature of this hand from the temperature of this hand. They can alter their blood pressure. They can slow down. They can do all kinds of miraculous things because they know and understand that this electrically fired organ that rides around inside our skull controls all of this, not the other way around. And yet we're routinely taught that our senses are what make us happy. If I can see, taste, touch, feel, or smell it, it's good. That's another part of the wolf. We'll talk about that some other time. But anyway, the moment of truth has come. You know, at some point in everyone's life, there's a moment of truth where they either make it or break it, where they figure out, maybe thinking this way is really not doing me any good. I'm going to change it. I'm going to fix that. Tears let it go on too long, hadn't he? It's broken free here. It's broken free here. And he is not known as a reconciler of men. It says it in the Lord. He is not a God of justice. He's got this wolf that he's been fucking feeding every day, and all his friends are trying to help him tie this thing down so it doesn't destroy all of it. Kind of blind to it. Much like we are in our own actions when we begin to believe the lies of other men and we begin to believe the lies we tell ourselves. It takes courage to be honest enough to recognize when I'm lying to myself. My first thought, the trained thought, the thought that I was conditioned to enjoy in society as being legitimate, and the anger that typically comes with it, maybe that pattern hadn't been so positive or helpful to me. Maybe I need to be honest about its effectiveness and take a little change from it. That's going to require pretty something special, isn't it? The wolf said, if you bind me so that I shall not get free again, then you will act in such a way that it will be late ere I receive help from you. He knows. See, at first it's hard for people to understand that inside their own thought process, there is another idea working to bolster itself instead of the individual, and that is the ego. And I will post a video on my Patreon from some of the best scientific minds of that community explaining how that really is. But it's there, and it's true, and it's working, and it's mostly a lie. What I type onto social media that makes me feel empowered, how do I stop myself from doing that? Because I get a little thrill out of that. I feel pretty good when I put somebody in their place. Nobody else in the world cares. Not another single soul in this world cares. But I'm feeding that wolf that's causing my own destruction, that's making me walk around angry about shit all the time. Now I'm going to bind it. And that's going to cost me something, isn't it? And many of the members of the AFA are beginning to feel that pinch as they're being kicked off of social media and many other groups, and they're being labeled and they're being called this and they're being called that. Now what are they going to do? I am unwilling that this ban should be laid upon me. Yet rather than that ye should impugn my courage, let some one of you lay his hand in my mouth for a pledge that this is done in good faith. Each of the Aesir looked at his neighbor, and none was willing to part with his hand. So when it comes down to it, and you begin to understand that your own thought process has been so out of control, it's put everyone around you in danger. Because you've been stealing from them, because you've been lying to them, because you've been trying to screw their wife or their husband or whatever. And you got to bind that bad boy up so you can continue to live in a manner that might be conducive to you growing old and being successful and earning some wisdom. Now it's going to cost you. Now you got to make a sacrifice. It might come in the form of losing a marriage. It might come in the form of losing a business. It might come in the form of going to jail and being slandered across public. It might come in the form of people not liking you anymore. Who gives a shit? I can't tell you how many times people have said, Brian, you're alienating your base. Wait a minute. If that's the base that's believing this because they want me to validate the fantasy that they live in, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. I'm going to be me. And I'm going to say and speak the truth as I see it in these things. So the wolf is fixing to be bound, but you're going to have to make a sacrifice. You're going to have to give up something. Until Tyr stretched out his right hand and laid it in the wolf's mouth. But when the wolf lashed out, the fetter became hardened, and the more he struggled against it, the tighter the band was. Then all laughed, except Tyr. He lost his hand. And that's a real difficult line to contend with. They all laughed at him. Well, shit, yeah, you dumbass. What'd you think you were going to get out of that without getting in trouble? What'd you think you was going to win, play stupid games, win stupid prizes? You've been feeding this damn stupid wolf for I don't know how long, and now it's threatened to every one of us, and because you wanted to feed it, well, now you fed it. Now you deal with it. If you can't dish it, if you can't take it, don't dish it out. Tyr did it, laid his hand in there and lost his hand. I still wouldn't tangle with him. You know what I mean? But that when the Aesir saw the wolf was fully bound, they took the chain that was fast to the fetter, which is called Gelgia, and passed it through a great rock, it is called Giol, and fixed the rock deep down into the earth. And then they took a great stone and drove it yet deeper into the earth. It was called Viti, and used the stone for a fastening pin. The wolf gaped terribly and thrashed about and strove to bite them. They thrust into his mouth a certain sword. The guards caught in his lower jaw and the point in the upper, and that is his gag. He howls hideously. The saliva runs out of his mouth. Marvelous ill children did Loki beget, but all these brethren are of great might. So you'd be surprised the negotiating that goes on in a junkie's mind when he knows it's time to quit. Here is much wailing and gnashing of teeth, and this wolf gaped terribly, thrashed about, strove to bite them, and get around somebody that's coming off of something. Get around somebody that's in the midst of throes of that kind of pain in their life. And I promise you, they will cause you, misery loves company. They will do their level best to make sure you feel the same way or worse and not think twice about it. And if they don't manage to bind the wolf and keep on going, they'll keep on destroying themselves. They'll continue to let the wolf devour themselves and everyone around them. And behind them will be a trail of human wreckage that they've left behind them as they've continued to feed that wolf every day. Whatever mindset, idea, thought process is devouring their idea. And even then, you might find like-minded people. You find people on the right that, hey, I believe that. Well, hey, I believe that too. And then they'll get along for a little bit. And the next thing you know, this guy's still feeding his wolf. And, oh, well, you don't quite believe it as much as I do. I'm going to leave you behind because I know something you don't. And I'm a little bit better than you. I see it happen every day. The real trick with all of this, and it's no accident that Loki is bound by his son's entrails after he'd been turned into a wolf. These are the things that would devour ancient man, the wolf and the bear. A pack of wolves was a dangerous thing to a man traveling in the forest alone. It's the most dangerous thing they could come up with. And we look at it and we see, oh, the pretty wolf, let's save the wolf, and wolf in this cage, and listen to him howl, it's beautiful, it touches my soul. That motherfucker in the wild will bite your face off. So we need to get real about some of this, some of the common perceptions we have about modern day wolves and stuff. These people lived it. There's no telling how long this tale was told around fires to inspire children in the cold winter to grow up and not feed that wolf. And we're still sitting here trying to figure out the father of life. We're still looking at here, Tyr sacrificed a hand for the well-being of the community. He kept that wolf bound. He fed the wolf until he had to pay for it, just like we do throughout our lives. Be it an unhealthy relationship, a drug addiction, some kind of pain-inducing thing we do to ourselves, or maybe it's just our own thought process and being a dick. That is the offspring of the father of lies. That is what happens when we begin to believe the bullshit of our own thought process. This is why everyone needs a mentor of some kind. Everyone needs a mentor to help them balance that. I don't care if you go on YouTube and watch Master Chim or or Paul or Jordan Peterson or Alan Watts or whomever, somebody positive to help you bring your thought process in line with something that's a little bit further along than just feeding the wolf and being angry about bullshit. The tale in some form is repeated, like I said, when Sigurd slays the dragon Fafnir at Regan's behest. We have enough bullshit on our own minds from our upbringing to wrestle with, negotiate through, to begin to understand how to even love or care about ourselves, to become something bigger, better, hopefully shining and bright and an example of Asatru to people that walk down the street, because it's quite likely you will be one of the very few examples of someone that lives this way of life to people you meet. Let's make it a positive one, instead of somebody that's feeding the wolf and the first thing you want to do is, are you motherfuckers ready to meet Odin? At any rate, that's all I got for this evening. I know the Super Bowl's on. I hope everyone enjoys it. I wanted Tampa Bay to win, but be that as it may, I will not be wearing another man's jersey. I might sell some on my Teespring for me, but be that. But anyway, does anybody have any questions or concerns or something you want to say about feeding the wolf in your life? What lie have you picked up that you feed on a daily basis because you think it makes you important? And how are you going to bind it? And that's a part of an interpretation of the Lord that you can put to use in your own life. Now, when other people begin to tell you an interpretation of the Lord, ask yourself that question: how can I use that in my own life? Guilds? What can I do with a guild? So, any questions? If not, tomorrow is Monday. I'm starting a new position as the number 3 person in a very prominent company in the world, and I'm very excited about it. Go out there and grab life by the nose and whip its ass.
Congratulations, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and